So good morning, everyone. What a great way to start or ending up our Friday. So here we are in our third webinar series of young professionals. My name is Francisco Pinto, and I am the coordinator of this webinar series. So today we are going to change a little bit the topic, a great topic we have here. So I hope you guys enjoy it. So we have here with us Quentin Lointon. He's going to be our speaker from today's webinar. The title is From Ideas to Submission, Using Generative AI to Streamline Research Article. So you have the Q&A chat here. Please, during the session, put all of your questions because later on we'll have Vladan representing our moderation session, and he's from the University of Singapore. So Quentin is an MSCA PhD student working on enabling the collective intelligence evidence based on democratic complex process called co-creation with digital technology. And thanks to this, he continuously explores all the potential of generative artificial intelligence for science, cognition, and collaboration. So Quentin, you have more or less 25 minutes. Remind all the participants that you have the Q&A chat, and feel free to put all your questions there because later on we'll have a discussion and roundtable to answer all of your questions. So Quentin, the floor is yours. Let's get into it, and please, I hope to hear your voice and not the ChatGPT. Thank you very much. Let's go.
Okay, thank you very much, Marcelo, for the presentation and the introductions. Hi, everyone. I'm very happy to be here and to share with you an exciting subject that I've been exploring for the past year, which is how to apply generative AI for science. So, I mean, you all heard, I think, about ChatGPT that's come to the market a year and a half ago around. And it's created like a lot of questions and noise in the society about what is going to change, what's going to affect. On one side, we have all this idea that is going to have a lot of risk, destroy some work, some jobs, and a lot of concern. And on the other side, you have like people who are already basically teaching us how to use it. And it's even more today than it used to be 6 months ago. And you have even university and groups making proper courses to know how to do it. And basically, it's affecting all parts of the society, and science is not spared about this. I'm sure you heard about this piece of paper which has been spotted being written by ChatGPT. Some human writing something and being accused that using ChatGPT. So today, when I saw this technology arriving, I've been very interesting for a reason. It's because I'm part of the Health Cascade Consortium, so I say Francisco, which try basically to establish co-creation, which is a collective intelligence process to solve complex problems. And I'm a cognitive scientist, and I'm working closely with a computer scientist. And together we are developing technology to improve that, this complex collective intelligence system. And when basically ChatGPT arrived, it was not completely new. We were using this technology already, but it gave us more power, obviously, but also a lot of more like versatility. And we were able to experiment much more with it. So we started to apply it for co-creation, collaboration, but also scientific practices and medical diagnosis. So this is basically the experience we accumulated that I will try to share with you today. So what we are going to do is that first we'll be sure that I'm not sure who knows what. So we will just make a quick update about what is generative AI. Was it different from the previous more discriminative AI? We will see potential usages in research for the whole step of research. And we will focus a bit on what we need to keep in mind if you want to integrate this technology in your research workflow. And also we'll end with like what are the potential impact for science and research. So the objectives are very simple, that at the end you understand what is generative AI, large language model, what are the potential usage, benefits, and risk, to give potential like advice to implement it in your workflow. So at the end, you can move on basically. You can move on to try to do it by yourself, and also join the conversation about how AI is going to change science. A little disclaimer, it's not a complete course in 25 minutes. I will need hours and hours on each usages to show you all the complexity behind, which is very interesting because it sounds very accessible, but it's a bit harder than that. And also be cautious because it's moving fast and there's a lot of discussion about, is it ethical to use this technology for your research? We will see a bit that later, but it's good to say it at the very beginning also. So first, what is generative AI? So sorry for the computer scientist here with us. I will be very, very simple, but generative AI is basically a subfield of artificial intelligence field, which is like the computer science field, which try to mimic human cognitive abilities, such as reasoning, visualization, identifications. And basically, you have machine learning, which basically model that learn from data by itself, deep learning model, which is characterized by this neural network system and architectures of learning. And basically, we can simplify a lot. There is different type of architecture, but basically, it's learned from a massive quantity of data and its significant computing power. This is why you have a race today about always getting more and more and more. And you have this new sub-category, which is generative AI into deep learning models. So what is different from generative AI? For me, what helped me to understand is to make the difference between discriminative AI, which is basically models that aim to distinguish between different classes of data. So differentiate, classify, identify pattern, draw conclusions. So basically, it will learn from the data, and when we will input a data, it will make a decision. It is group red or it is group blue. Example, email spam. If it's arrived to your mailbox, it will choose if it's a spam or not. On the other side, we have generative AI, which doesn't have a specific goal, and their innovative capacities to create new content based on the training data. So it will capture the underlying distribution of the training data, and then with a prompt, it will generate a novel data point. So very practically, you will give a picture to the discriminative AI and ask the question, is it a cat? And the model, based on its learning, will be able to say yes or no. On the other side, you will input a prompt and trigger a reaction of the model in a generative AI to generate a cat. So it's interesting because we realize that actually it can be applied in many different domains. It can do text generation, image, audio, video, code, data, and virtual world. And quickly, a report of McKinsey said that generative AI has a potential to change anatomy of work by augmenting the capability of individual workers, automating some of their individual activity, and it created a big hype, basically, because they were like, oh, we can do much more with AI than we used to think we were able to do, especially for creativity. And clear identified field that might be impacted. It's basically programming, entertaining industry, education, finance, healthcare, and basically administration and project management. So what we will focus a bit today, and I think this is the most relevant for science, are large language model. So they are the model which basically manipulates languages. They can do text compression, summarization, question answering, translations, code generation, image and text pairing, conversational interaction, and reasoning capacity. So this last one is very interesting for cognitive scientists like me, because I'm always wondering what they mean by reasoning. And it's actually very interesting. So people claim it can do that. And it's very interesting. It's an ongoing debate, but it's good to keep in mind. So there is already plenty of tools for specific targeted for scientists who are almost, and who claim to be able to make literature review, to help you to write your papers and everything, to explore PDF. And actually, there are more than that. They are going every day. But most of them are basically based on foundation models, which is, for example, even not ChatGPT, but the GPT models. So what I did myself is that I used ChatGPT and I tried to apply it in every aspect of my research. And I tried to see, okay, what was it efficient? What ethical issue I was facing? And this is a bit what I'm going to show you in the next part. So ChatGPT looks very simple. It looks very accessible. It's basically, you might know this. I'm sure you already touched it at least once. And it looks like just a chatbot, basically. But actually, you can do a lot with this. And it doesn't exactly explain. For example, generating graph data, you can generate correct code. And you can even explore abstract notions. And so whole community started to try to see what we were able to do with this kind of model. And you can do a lot. And basically, I tried to do as much as things I was able to do. So I will show you now what I tested, basically with that. And I realized that I will need hours and hours. So we'll do an overview on the main step of research process, and I will comment the different usage I tested. So formulating your questions, I tested it to do literature review, trend analysis, identifying research gaps, supporting ground application. This last one is very controversial, but it's always depends how you use it. But it actually works in a way that it can like actually analyze a big chunk of literature, help us to identify gaps that we were not able to do as humans, especially in a world where literature is growing fast, and it's hard to keep up. You can use it to support you to select the best method for your hypothesis to test it. You can generate synthetic data, which can be very interesting now to test a new hypothesis in an innovative way. It's very useful for project management. For data analysis, it can help to clean your data pre-processing. It can help you to suggest what type of analyzing data you should do. It can interpret your data. I'm not saying it's doing it well, but it can do it. It can definitely generate codes, which can make you earn a lot of time. For the discussion, it can contextualize the result. Again, depending on the tool, it can go back to the literature, search what can be useful for your result. It can generate insights. It can propose future research directions. It can draft reports. It can help you to reference, which is very interesting, but we will see later. It can help you to make feedback on your writing, which is very useful examples for me who is not a native English speaker. And it can definitely help me to make my write better and more accessible for reading also. It can help you to do journal selections very quickly. You make your abstract, for example, and you ask ChatGPT if it actually there is like, it can match, there is like a tool online where it can match a publisher and find maybe the one that is best for you. I think some publishers are already developing some tool also to try to assess that. It can help you to generate your abstract and prepare your manuscripts and post-public engagement. And I think it's very useful because I'm a scientist. I'm not always good at social media. It can help you to actually engage community and publics to make it accessible with like post or video around your research. And there is potential benefits. What I saw myself that it make me more productive. You can do more with less time. It can help you to explore, innovate different way to do your research, different idea. It can help you also to justify and be more accurate and specific on what you are trying to do. It can also improve accessibility, for example, for coding. It's very useful because if you want to generate chunk of coding, you can do it like never before. And it can also improve replicability by, for example, for the coding again, by adding all the comments necessary for the next one to replicate your work. So I did a workshop for the European Commission earlier this week. So I can show you like how it's looked basically very shortly, some of this tool. So for example, for literature review, and there is plenty of this tool. I'm showing you this now, but there's plenty of one. SciSpace is an example. And basically you are gonna ask your questions and it's gonna search in the database and it's gonna basically find what the model thinks is relevant for your questions. It's gonna aggregate chunk of the text to make a paragraph. So we say, for example, these questions. It's gonna charge. How does climate change impact biodiversity? And it's proposing the relevant paper there, an insight, and it's giving you, sorry for that, if I can close this, and it gives you basically a little summary. I'm not saying it's good. I'm just saying this is what the model is doing. And this is a good question. We'll see why after that we need a human to be sure it's good. But basically the model is proposing me. So what I did for the workshop is that we made literature explorations. So we made like 3 questions like this. And then we use this AI generated summary to do basically a brainstorming of research idea. So I'm gonna show you here what we did very quickly also, because we will need to do it again. I first asked the model to brainstorm some research idea, what we call naive prompt. So I say generate idea on hybrid collective intelligence, my field. What I found is that most of the times the idea are not bad, but they're very general, very not specific enough to be honest to progress. So what you need to do after that, and it's a bit of prompt engineering, you need to ask more detailed questions. You're organizing, you're telling the model more precisely what you're looking for. So you give more background. For example, I ask intersect rationality, education, teenage, potential innovation research, and it gave me basically more specific ideas, which is better. Most of people do naive prompts, so it's good to know that there is an art of prompting. You can go deeper in one of the questions. So the model, for example, we go deeper in one of the idea it proposed me, and it will propose some hypothesis. And it becomes basically better and better in a way that it becomes more and more specific. Then another dimension is the data. So this is important of prompting well. And then it's important to have the right data that the model can use. So what we did is that we took the 3 paragraphs we created previously and we implemented it in a prompt. And then we generated basically, we asked the same question, please generate the idea. And it was even more specific based on the mini literature review we made. What I want to show you here is that AI can technically make a literature review, and then Streamline creating directly research idea. This is a very simple way to say how we can identify research gap. Very simple, but I needed to use free tools, so I use free tools. And then the last little example I would show you is basically data analysis and coding. Again, we just go through it. I generate synthetic data, so the model was able to do this. And I asked the model first, please give me a descriptive analysis. So it generated a descriptive analysis here. Notice that you can have some risk, but we'll say it later. And then I ask, okay, I would like to evaluate these different variables. What should I do with that? I say, okay, you should do basically a Pearson correlation. So I asked for my data what I wanted to do, and it was able to basically suggest me an analysis. And I say, okay, it's great. So it was very generous because it generated me a bit of code. But I asked, okay, can you generate me actually a code that I can do a Pearson correlation? So generated it to me, I tested it, and it worked without editing. And fun fact, I asked at the very beginning when I generated my data to make it significantly correlated for these two variables, which is age and income. And it was significantly correlated, which is important because it also means that we can generate data that go into our hypothesis. So this is for the very few examples. Again, I will need more time to make a full training, but it makes you visualize basically how easy it is to use, because all of what I show you is free. And if you want the prompt and everything, I can share with you. I have the instructions file. So now we speak a lot about the benefits. So let's speak a bit about the risk. So we see the examples. So when you integrate this in your work, there is, in my opinion, two big dimensions. The first one is about the technology. You have the model, you have the data, and you have the prompt. This is the three main core of you need to have in mind when you use generative AI. And basically, what type of model for my task? Do I have the data to support it? And how I ask the machine to do it? So it gives you a model output, which is basically the probability, base probability output from the model. Then you have some risk. Maybe your data are not sufficient and are not quality enough. Maybe your model is biased and non-performant. Maybe your prompt is not optimal. We saw that naive prompting is not triggering as good output. So it can lack of accuracy and reliability. It's a famous thing that we call hallucination, basically. It can create noise and it can miss the target of what you want to create. The only way I found to control this, computer scientists try as much to improve accuracy. Me, as a cognitive scientist, I'm thinking about how humans can actually collaborate with the model in order to get what we want and to create the human AI cooperation outcome. This is the product you are going to use in your research or any other task. But human is also has also its own issue. You can have an over-reliance on the model. You trust it too much because you don't understand how it's works. And you can also be biased because you might want to confirm your hypothesis. And then you ask the model, for example, a reference to confirm your hypothesis, which is not representative of the literature. So basically, it creates a lot of risk as much as it creates potential. It creates a risk of ethics, science integrity. You can lose your intellectual, basically you are not contributing intellectually to the outcome. And it can also affect how you are getting new skill, or even maybe not remove it, but basically losing some of them. So this is why so many also ask to not using it. It's because it's very blurry. It's very hard to understand how actually to articulate this balance between the model and the human. But the model is able to do things that human is not, and inversely. So the whole challenge is how actually you can balance both. So I will give you some advice that I found relevant for myself. So first, it's very important to learn how this technology works. You don't need to become a computer scientist, but you need to understand that it's probability, aggregation of word. For example, putting data in your prompt is more likely to be used in your output, but if you try to call knowledge from the model, all this kind of thing will help you to understand how the technology is working and what you can actually trust and not. Then you have two big questions that help me a lot to ask when I use this. First, can I take the responsibility of the outcome? At the end, when you use an outcome in your research, you are responsible. So it's exactly like having an assistant. If the assistant is suggesting some things, at the end, if it's wrong, you are responsible for it. So it's very important that you articulate your cooperation, that when you are not sure, because you don't have another sources to support the outcome, you have to search a source, something to come and support this. Don't trust it. Don't copy paste, basically. And then, is my outcome replicable without AI? I think this is a big question because there is this question of, shall we, when we use AI, especially for brainstorming, for example, shall we disclose it in the paper? There is different idea. I think some of them say, oh, you should, but it's not always very clear, because if you use AI to, I don't know, to organize your work in a table to help you, why you should disclose it, So I think it's very important that if you use AI and it's necessary to have this AI and prompt in order to replicate your work, you need to disclose it. This is a rule of thumb, just to avoid to mess up all the scientific creation, basically. So quickly, what you need is, you need to be a double expert. You need to be an expert in your field, because this is only because you're an expert in your field that you can evaluate the quality of the outputs. You need to be an expert in this cooperation relationship. So you need to understand how it's working, when you shouldn't use it, when you can include it. Because you're responsible at the end of the day. It's very important. And you're responsible, and also it's important for you to ensure you are still continuing to develop skills and get the skills you need. Remember, I mean, we are not starting from scratch about this. It's look like completely new, but it's very good to keep in mind all the rules you learn about science until now, like how to maintain ethics, how to maintain scientific integrity, how you can always develop new skills in order to keep this expertise when you're using AI. And it's not as good as it sounds like, oh, we can automate everything, but it's still very useful. And it will keep being useful only if we actually maintain the expertise of the researcher. And a good guideline I find, I mean, they are not perfect because they're always missing actually how people use it. They are not very clear. And most of the time they are saying, do your best, try to be ethical. But I would suggest you to have a look on the guideline on the responsible use of generative AI in research developed by the European Research Area Forum. They are living documents, so they are evolving. They are 12 pages, and they worth to be read before using this technology. And try always to make good science, basically. Also, it's a new way of working. So just to conclude that, today, what I see is that many people try to basically automate some of what they know how to do science today. So like, oh, I'm going to automate a literature review, I'm going to do this, but the tool is not accurate enough to be trusted completely. So you need, if you integrate that, to be a bit more creative by keeping this responsibility. For example, for the little paragraph we generated earlier, I'm going to read it, and I'm going to spot everything I'm not sure about. I'm going to spot maybe the references, maybe it's the references I don't know. And since I don't do second-hand referencing, I cannot just copy-paste this text in my literature review. But it can still help me to keep up with the innovation, to attract my attention on something relevant. This is what it can be good, but humans still need to be in the loop. And this is how to keep it in the loop. That's the most important. So I will finish. I don't know about the time. Maybe I'm speaking a bit too fast, but thanks, Francisco. But I'm going by finish by this what this transformative potential of this technology on science, and that is good to talk about this together. Because in 10 years, science might be completely different from what we know now. So the positive potential is basically increasing efficiency and productivity. It's also improving accessibility and collaboration. for me, for example, it's easier now to learn coding and also to approach complex idea outside my field because this AI can try to translate for me. It also can improve quality of research. It's interesting because people see the drawback of AI and try just to say, oh, it's not good enough. Our system, keep it like that. But to show you, our system is not perfect. And science is characterized by this ability to improve itself all the time. This AI can bring something different, but it can be good only if you try to basically get the strength of human and AI and try to make it complementary. Promotion of interdisciplinary research, exactly for this accessibility between different fields because we can understand each other better. And we can more dynamic and interactive research output, also basically to bridge a bit the gap between public and science and make us understand better. But there is also a negative potential impact. Obviously, the risk of bias and misinformations. The model can be biased, and if we all base our research idea on that, it can orient us in a way that is actually not very useful. So this is very important to keep this in mind. We can also do an over-reliance on technology and finally become completely dependent. So bigger risk is that I was advocating for keeping expertise of research because what could be the risk is that we just become technician of AI. We are just here to implement the parameter and let the AI make the work. And there is plenty of bad reason to do that. Intellectual property and plagiarism concern. This is a problem of generative in general, like how data it has been trained, how when it's generated, who gets intellectual property. It's still an ongoing debate. It can undermining the peer review process. Like the fact that we are evaluated for most countries, some countries, that's a problem on the quantity of paper we are doing. This tool can generate a lot, but it can generate a lot of noise. And then because of the noise, we might have an increase of quantity of paper, and to keep up, the publisher will not use human, but will use AI. And we start to have a loop where AI is speaking for AI. And it's completely stupid, to be honest. So there is really, we have problem in our research system. It's just like increasing it. So it's time to think about it to make it better. Economic and professional displacement. If we can replace people with AI, it's not different from other fields. Science is also concerned. So there is a question about what will be the impact on human. Accessibility and equity concern. If North country, Western country can have access to this technology and go faster and better, what about the other country who doesn't have access to this? And there is an important gap that we shouldn't basically increase. And a big one, which is the environmental impact. It's polluting a lot. This technology are impacting the environment a lot. And even some people say, oh, we're gonna make like technology better and everything. Well, we can see in the past with smartphone and we also think that we are still struggling with that. So there is a big question about, okay, how we can actually identify best practices about using AI for research to be sure that a generalization of AI for researchers is not going to skyrocket the carbon footprint of making science. Okay, so I hope I'm on time. I'm sorry if I spoke a bit fast, but I'm very happy sharing this with you, which I'm very passionate about. So I'm very looking forward to your question and have a discussion with you. Thank you very much for listening.
Quentin, thank you very much for a very nice presentation. It's a very complex topic indeed, but I think you managed to cover the crucial highlights. So now it's time for the discussion. I will pass the word to Vladan. I will thank you, Vladan, for being here, for helping us in this webinar. So Vladan, let's start with this discussion. I see that you already have 6 questions in the Q&A chat, so let's go into it.
Thank you, Francisco. Thank you, Quentin, for the talk and presentation. Obviously, very happy to be part of the Young Professional Network, even though I'm not that young, but I'm happy to affiliate myself with being young. There are questions here, and if you allow me, indulge me just for a few seconds before I raise a question. Obviously, what Quentin shares is new technology, just like any other new technology in the history of mankind. You have a very polarized society. You have people that are afraid of new technology, and you have people that embrace new technology. And with industrial revolution, you have Luddites, for example, followers of Ned Ludd, who went around and destroyed machines, sewing machines in particular, because they were afraid that they were going to take away job from ladies that were manually sewing. We've learned how to live with machines, these first machines, we've learned how to benefit from them. And now we live in this age of a second machine, which I love your closing slide, your skills are irreplaceable. There are a number of skills, and this is very important societal question. There are a number of skills that will remain irreplaceable. But there are a number of skills that will be replaceable, and it's inevitable. And so we just have to find a way of, through education, through different education, through better education, how do we do this? Because the prompt engineering that Quentin also alluded in his presentation, so how do you engineer your prompt, is going to be a skill that our education system will have to embrace. Well, 11 questions already here, and I would start. I think, Quentin, it will be okay for you to share this a PDF of your presentation later with the audience. Very good, thank you very much. And through IHR Secretariat, the video recording of this webinar will be made available, particularly for people who are in the other parts of the world, like United States. It's a not very convenient time, so we will make sure that this is all available for everyone who has registered this. Here's one question that I like to start with, and this is environmental impacts, and it's raised by Jason Pinza. In relation to environmental impact, what is your thought of AI consuming a lot of water? And I think the question should really be about requiring lots of energy. Just to give you one number, and this is what OpenAI is doing. OpenAI is investing heavily in next generation nuclear power plants because the data centers require a lot of energy for cooling, for all sorts of purposes. So, Quentin, what can you reflect a little bit more on environmental impacts?
Yeah, I mean, you're an association, which I'm sure you know much more than me about this. But my very first idea that I feel like it's taking place in this overall idea of like technology is gonna save environment, so it's okay to push to develop always more and more technology because at some point we will save the world with it. I'm not really part of this idea. I think we need to be more cautious and thinking. And the problem is that it's a capitalist profitable race. So they think that it's a new market that will worth billions. So they're just racing to go there, and they don't really care about the environment. And it's very hurtful, to be honest, for me and for the cost of water, especially drinkable water and everything. So I just try to advocate that as soon as in science we can identify best practices, we can develop like tools with smaller model, with cost less, and we can try as much as possible to reduce the cost of this. But yeah, it's hurt my heart, to be honest.
Well, thank you, Quentin. Well, there are tendencies to actually replace. Some data that I'm familiar with Llama 3, which is a Meta AI large LLM model published. It's not published actually, it's still proprietary ownership of Meta AI. 90 billion weights, 90 billion weights. I work with these technologies for almost 30 years, and you know, we used to deal with 1,000 weights, but 90 billion is extraordinary thing. Google has just generated a generic time series forecast tool using a sequence of 900 billion syllables to use for predictive purpose. Now, this is what the large tech is able to do. Fortunately, there are now open source models with much reduced complexity that can be, number one, verified independently by community, and also be much less expensive in terms of energy, cooling, etc., and being able to run. So there are initiatives. This technology is really still in very early stages, and we will see, of course, differentiation, development of other stuff. So yes, we should be concerned about use of water, use of energy. But I think as we learn about this, some balance will hopefully be fine. I see a very interesting question for you, Quentin. Can you share more about a risk of bias?
I love these questions. So, I mean, it's depending what you mean, if you mean about the model bias or the human bias. But what I like to think about it is like how they can actually interact with each other. Model or bias because of training data, and they so orient the outcome to a specific direction which is not representative to the reality. And this is a bit what is doing human also. So I think it's good because the output of the model doesn't make sense without a human interpretation that can identify the relevancy of it, especially for generative AI. So I think it's good to keep in mind both, that when you use this technology as a human, you are also biased. And in science, we try to reduce this bias with specific scientific method that we follow. And ideally, I hope that one day we'll be able to do this with also models. So this is why your expertise is fundamental in order to mitigate the risk of bias when you're using this model. But knowing also beforehand what model you're using and what type of bias they have is also fundamental in my opinion. This is why it's good to know how this technology works.
So can I continue along those lines, Quentin, and ask you a little bit deeper? If you can discuss a little bit or differentiation between foundational models and more specific models, right? Because obviously a chat GPT version 2, VO2 in particular, is something that is trained on a certain body of evidence. And for example, there's also another question by one of members of our audience, Laknath, who says, for literature review part, I understand that ChatGPT and other tools may not have access to the latest research journals, hence the identification of research gaps may not be accurate. So is there an argument for use of foundational models that are then additionally refined within a specific domains? What would be your thought?
I think I like foundation model to explore the capacity of the technology, but I think the future, especially for the use of science, will be in more narrow model, narrow tool. So this kind of foundation model, which is specially organized for specific tasks, as you say, for literature review and everything. What we are missing, I feel, for now is proper meta science. So basically, evaluating this tool with a proper methodology in order to assess the quality for a specific task. There is benchmark evaluations, which is it's a field which explodes so much. There is so many new models, so many new tools, so many organizations, so even many new benchmarks that for now it's a bit complex to be sure that it's working properly, in my opinion. But yeah, it's likely to go in these directions. For me, for literature review, if I want to search some things, I will use this tool much more like an exploration. And I will complete with my own skill and my own thing I learned in my graduate school in order to be sure I can make the best of most. So what I used to do and try to cover a bit further with this tool, but at least I have the security of my own expertise.
Maybe to change a little bit of line of discussion, Jordanos from Ethiopia ask about the role of AI in the future educational sector.
That's a big topic. That's a big topic, yeah.
I've seen the Khan Academy publishing fantastic video of Khan's son interacting with chat to explain linear algebra concepts. So, this is one angle, of course, with education, but also it has profound impact as to what do we teach. I used to teach my students how to code in Python, and obviously I don't have to do that anymore, right? Because they can generate this in chat. So what are your thoughts on this?
Well, it's an exploding. It has been a little earthquake, I think, in education because, for example, at your university, from the next day, basically, students were able to write essays way better than they used to do. And we are struggling to try to see what did happen and how we can check and spot when we are using AI. So I think it's definitely changing. As it changed, Google changed our way also to evaluate knowledge because it gave this new tool. What I would suggest, because I'm facing that for developing my skill as a PhD student, I'm like, okay, when I use this and when I can be sure I develop skills. And I feel that the most important, we might have to still learn to do stuff a bit like, for example, learning to do a divisions, and then we will use a calculator. But because we know how the divisions is made, we can still understand what is going on and check if there is a problems. My feeling is that to be very, for like learning in general, but from experience of PhD student, I still need to learn how to do a summary because I can identify what key element are into the text, and then I can do a summary. Then I will use AI to do the same, but because I know how to do it, I can spot if actually the summary contains all the informations. So we still need to develop skills, and then we will just go faster later with AI because it will be able to do it for us. This is my thought for now, but I think it might change because it's going very fast.
Here is another, perhaps, point, a food for thought. When we started using search engines, I'm senior enough to remember the world without Google, how hard it was. And Google changed with all PageRank algorithms and everything, changed the way how we interact with the internet. There is a highly reliable analysis indicating that every time you type a keyword in Google search engine, it costs around 2 cents to produce results. That is the aggregated cost of energy to actually run PageRank algorithm and push result to your browser, 2 US cents. A result of a chat output costs in the order of 45 cents. So chat, despite obviously impressive capabilities, it's still a much more expensive way of doing it. So hopefully the things are going to change. So this is an economic side of this, and OpenAI as a company is still to start generating profits, and you will see many people raising the eyebrows, how come this company runs? So this is the economic angle on this. How do you see these sort of stuff driving evolution of this technology? The cost.
It's a good questions. I mean, for now, what I saw, and I think I've been, is like there is a proportions a bit between the size of the model, the data necessary for it, the energy necessary for it, the environmental cost necessary for it, and the price. And it's like a correlation between this. And I feel there is, as I say, like you mentioned more specific model, which is absolutely true. But it's a bit like bigger is better for now, and it might be more expensive. But I think our society might be satisfied at the point that it's still making profit because it sees that as an investment. But it's not, I mean, as I say, like some models are better than others. The foundation model, which are very big like this and cost a lot, they're also very versatile, which is very nice to do plenty of things. But it doesn't mean they are very good for specific tasks. Like coding is a good example. So I hope that in the future, we'll have more like open source foundation model that are accessible to everyone, and we don't have to train house, and then we'll save cost and energy and everything. And we will have also like more specific tools, which are less expensive and still do the job we want, basically. I hope I answered the question. I'm not sure.
Right, it's a discussion point.
Okay.
Yeah. Look, Thomas Dishard asks, have you noticed any differences in use of ChatGPT in English and other languages? You're French, Quentin, correct? So how does it feel to interact with a chat in French or Portuguese or Spanish or English? Is it the same?
It's a very interesting question on a linguistic point of view. We love linguistic and cognitive science also, but I saw recently that, so theoretically, it's been trained much more on English than on any other language. So it might be better in English, and more you go to a language that doesn't have a lot of data, less you are likely to be accurate, which basically push also in direction of English, which is already dominating everything. And I was reading a philosopher who was saying like, oh, actually the risk is that we are going hard to speak a very middle plan English because it's basically an average of all English everywhere. So what I do personally, that I speak English with it, if I may say, because I try to optimize, I try to please the model in order to have the best output. But it's also very good for translating. So I still believe it can give a lot of accessibility. So my advice, and it's not maybe what I want to see in society, it's maybe if you want to use it more efficiently, is to speak in English, and then use it if you want to translate in complex idea more in your native language, is to do it. And I think it's way better than it used to be. So except if you speak a very, very specific language, it might be useful.
Zubida Nemer asks also one of the discussion questions. She's worried about impacts of ChatGPT on creativity. I mean, creativity is obviously important for science. As a scientist, you need to be able how to communicate knowledge and the ideas, and supervision. She says, I'm supervising multiple theses and find myself reading the same passage with the same words and syntax. I love when my students use their own style and words to communicate their ideas. As I know, they can be really creative. How do you think we should deal with such situations? Should we encourage? And I'm also a professor, and at our university we have decided that we should encourage students to use chat rather than preventing them. But yes, there is a strong ethical perspective in questioning what is a responsible use.
Yeah, again, creativity. I love it. I mean, it's interesting because we never had such a technology. Language is like the foundation of our representation of the world. We manipulate our presentation with words, grammar, and having such a tool that can actually induce like this in our mind, it's unprecedented. at such scale and versatility. So for me, why people are using it, at least PhD student and I think researcher, they are driven by the thing that we need to be productive always. And it's just becoming like a competitive advantage. You are going to produce more. The question is, can we produce better? I think. And this is where the ethics come into play. And maybe PhD students will use just to like summarize or make a text which is generic writing. And this is why you start to read exactly the same thing all the time. And I think this is mostly also because this is a force driving people to go faster and not the force to try to make better science. And we don't know how to make better science with this technology yet. So there is a true ability and creativity is one to understand and learn how to do it better in order we get the most of it. And we just not become technicians by triggering the model, saying, okay, it's good enough, I copy paste it. And I do believe that, and I'm still struggling with that, like maybe if you don't process information yourself in your mind, you might lose some of the richness of the process. For example, you do a literature review, nice, you have exactly what you wanted. But at the same time, you didn't get lost in some of the paper. You didn't maybe spot an original idea that triggers something new because you didn't take the time to read the full papers. It's a trade between time and productivity. And we need to make, I think, actually meta science to evaluate actually the effect of this technology and using them. But yeah, it's a lot of things that we need to study basically.
So you're partially addressing the question that Samuela Guida is raising, and this is how can we prevent people from copy pasting information generated by chat without proper attribution, right? Should we consider developing tools that can differentiate between human and AI generated content? So should this be done alongside ChatGPT? Should this be responsibility of OpenAI to help us differentiate between?
It's a good question. I think it's almost how we want to tackle this new technology coming in our society. Since the tool until now didn't work well to spot AI generated text, my advice when I do this presentation, I talk to people is to say, think about your skill, you know. If tomorrow the model is bad, because the model is not stable, it's owned by company that can modify it. So you might do something good enough to pass with the model without understanding it. But if you have to be in another situation or if you need to take responsibility, you cannot. So when I use it, I'm always trying to say, okay, I need to be responsible. And in order to do that, I need to understand so I can talk about this with someone later. But yeah, not everyone or depending on the situation are doing that. I guess even you develop a tool that can spot, obviously, you might be able to trigger it, you know, like you can have the model, okay, modify this, replace this word, change like that, make it this tone, and then it won't be able to detect it. So I'm not very confident I will be able to develop a tool that can actually 200% sure spot if it's an AI generated text. But maybe it's worth to trying and having this tool in our toolbox if it's necessary.
Well, practical question. Abera Ms. Gana Toler asks, is Chat GPT collecting data?
If you use the free versions of ChatGPT, yes, you need to know that. If you use the paid versions, I think still now, and you use like what we call MyGPT, you can select an options to say you don't want. It's moving again very fast. I think there are like a huge request for like company and different like organisms say, okay, we love this, we want to explore, but we are not gonna use it for our own data if you're gonna use it to train your model and everything. So my advice is to check. Usually this information is available because they're very sensitive questions. So before using a model, check if actually it's encrypted, kept, protected, or if it's actually sent to the server in order to train the model. Yeah, it's good to check.
Okay, we've been talking for about an hour and the questions are coming in. So obviously you have Quentin's contact detail. I'm sure Quentin will be happy to continue these discussions, and if necessary, we can have a follow-up stuff. I would like to, before I give a floor to Francisco to close, I just want one remark, which is an amazing thing that I read in Financial Times yesterday. Technology is moving up. It's still not regulated. EU is trying to do something. United States is trying to do something else. The companies are trying to do their own stuff. As Quentin referred to this, some capitalistic drive may end up pushing these things in one direction. What I read yesterday in Financial Times is that OpenAI has just hired 35 lobbyists to influence legislation that is still being developed, particularly in the United States. Legislation that will govern how this technology may be used. So for me, this is the biggest sign of concern from a human democratic perspective. You know, it's not technological evolution per se. It's not only how we as users will benefit from it, yes or no, but the fact that lobbyists are engaged means that there are different interests at play that are not necessarily altruistic interests. Any final thought on this, Quentin, and then I'll give a floor to Francesco.
Well, I mean, you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. I think there is a big battle and different philosophy also, I think, to approach this question depending of cultures and societies. In Asia, in Europe, or in the United States, historically about AI, we don't have the same approach. And now this thing, what I feel mostly that policymakers are chasing the technological innovation. And I'm speaking time to speak with some unit at the European Commissions because they are completely lost. And it's normal. I spend my time to understand that. So I think it's good that we all get aware of it and be able to take part to this whole discussion in order we are here to hear our voice when it's possible. Yeah.
Thank you, Quentin. Thank you for insights. Francisco, would you like to close this webinar?
Yes, I mean, I would like to thank you all for being here, Quentin for accepting this challenge once again, Vladimir from being present from Singapore at this time. And also I would like to thanks to Michael Nones who helped me out during this organization. And guys, this webinar is going to be recorded and it's going to be published in the webinar page of this webinar series. So if you miss something out, feel free to dive into the web page and see it later on. And if you need any certificates, you also have there the information, the email in which you have to send for requests. So thank you all once again, Quentin. Merci beaucoup, and we'll see you soon. Even though we can have another webinar on this topic, because I see that you have a lot of questions and people are getting interested a lot in these topics. So that's all from my side, and thank you very much and have a nice weekend.
Thank you very much for inviting me. Have a good day.